4 years ago, I bought one of these, a ceramic knife.
In a world where ceramic knives are known to be throwaway consumables, one man stands in the way.
I tried it out and realized it was insane in one area, edge retention.
That's all my cardboard.
So I think in terms of cutting up cardboard, I don't think that there's any knife out there that could beat a ceramic knife. Yes, it does beat CPM M4 by a long shot. It's not even close. I saved up a lot of cardboard for this, and probably over 1,000 feet of cardboard. No lie. I mean, I think it was around 45 cuts, 18 inches of cardboard. We lost that absolute shaving edge, but it stayed at that pretty much the same sharpness throughout the rest of this cutting test and hasn't really dulled much since then. So let's see if we can sharpen this back to shaving sharp. But the problem is that when it finally did dull, I completely failed at resharpening it. It's phone book paper, and it most definitely will not shave, so I don't know how to make it sharper. At least not without resorting to some extreme measures. Now, there's one area in my life where I have never failed, and that is knife sharpening. I've never failed to sharpen a knife, except for this one.
I felt defeated.
I don't know how to make it sharper. So, here we are, 4 years later. Let's take another look at ceramic knives. Give it another try and try to dispel some of the myths surrounding ceramic knives, some of which I may be responsible for. I don't know. What's going on here? How do I sharpen this thing? I don't know. Because I was wrong. I was wrong about these, sort of. Right out of the box, this is what the factory new edge looks like up close under the microscope. So, are we going to have the same chipping issues we had before after some use? Now, I know from past testing and current testing that a ceramic knife will hold a better working edge than any steel knife cutting cardboard, period. It's not even close. If your job is to cut cardboard all day long, then choose a ceramic knife.
Well, how much cardboard does the average person really cut up?
Now, I was going to give accurate cardboard cutting numbers here in feet, but I ran out of cardboard before this knife would stop cutting pretty thin graph paper. Now, the shaving edge was gone after about 47 feet of cardboard. And here's what that non-shaving edge after 47 feet of cardboard looks like up close. Oh boy, an absolute chippy nightmare of a fine apex. But the working edge held on forever. For a lot of stuff, these very fine microchips don't really matter. So, the working edge isn't really that affected. Only for the very fine tasks like shaving can you really tell a difference. So, at this point, the only thing that I could do was to see whether or not I could put the shaving edge back on this knife. Now, I sat down for hours and hours this time trying to sharpen this knife. This time using resin bonded stones rather than the plated diamond stones I was using several years ago that was causing all of the chipping issues. So the thing is, if I take my finger and run it down the edge, it feels like there's like micro chipping. It feels like chips. And after hours of trying, I was running into problems. The problem is that I kept getting chipping again as soon as I was apexing. It doesn't really shave. I mean, sure, you could get it to shave if you like force it down and like tear hairs out and whatever, but I think that is due, after looking at the up-close image, that's due to the sawtooth nature of the apex. Basically, as soon as the edge came to an exact point, it would break off and I'd have to start all over. Now, I did this over and over and over again, somehow thinking that the basic principles of sharpening somehow don't apply to ceramic knives. And trying numerous different resin-bonded diamond stones, thinking that the problem was the stone and not me. And suddenly it dawned on me. We're back to shaving. I think we may have figured it out. If I was having the same problem with a steel knife rather than a ceramic knife, what would I do? I would increase the sharpening angle relative to the stone, making the apex more obtuse, thus solving the apex stability problem. And so that's what I did. So I just cut some more cardboard. I've just taken away that hair shaving edge. I mean, it is just on the verge of not shaving. Now, I want to see how quickly I can put it back. The light passes on the Veneve 1200. All right, we're shaving right off the stone. I think I figured it out. All this time, my problem is not what I thought it was. And like magic, turns out ceramic doesn't like very acute angles. It doesn't like pointy angles on knives. It simply lacks the apex toughness to hold those more extreme edge geometry angles. Who would have thought? It's almost like someone has been saying this exact thing for years here on YouTube. I don't know who that person could be. So once I finally realized this and started following my own advice, how long does this take to sharpen? All right, we're shaving right off the stone. So here's what this edge looks like. This is off of a Veneve 1200, which is actually about a 3000 grit stone, and stropped on a 1 micron and 1/10 micron diamond strop. My findings are that ceramic dulls via chipping. It doesn't really wear away like traditional steel. And you can see this right here with the CPM M4 blade. Both the ceramic knife here and the CPM M4 blade here have the same amount of cuts. The ceramic chips, the M4 sort of abrades away. Now keep in mind, this 59 seconds was to simply bring it from a working edge back to shaving sharp. Bringing it from a truly messed up apex like this one here requires you to go through an entire grit progression just like a steel knife, only rather than creating a burr, ceramic makes chips. The finer you go, the smaller the chips and the sharper the knife. Now I only used $280 worth of sharpening stones to bring this edge back from a truly dull state. In other words, ceramic dulls via chipping and resharpens via chipping. Now in terms of where do the chips go if you're using this for food prep, and is ingesting ceramic chips versus metal dust any better or worse for you, I have absolutely no idea. But speaking of food prep, another reason you'll hear people say they use ceramic knives versus steel knives is to keep the food from oxidizing, due to the ceramic knife's lack of transferring ions from the blade to the food, unlike its steel counterparts. Now this sounds like absolute hogwash to me, so I decided to test it out. First, I cut a banana with a freshly sharpened ceramic knife, and a typical $1 freshly sharpened stainless steel knife, to see which one browned over first. Alright, the results of our banana test are that they look almost identical. I really can't tell a difference here. This was the ceramic, I believe, and this was the stainless steel. Oh, and they pretty much look identical. Now you may be saying to yourself, well, you didn't let them sit out long enough to tell a difference. Well, these sat out for 2 hours. Enough said. Now how about an apple? Surely we can tell a difference with an apple. Stainless steel, ceramic. So now for the results of our apple test. You tell me down below which one you think is the ceramic and which one you think is the steel. Do it. Do it now. Pause the video and go tell me below. No cheating now. This one right here is the ceramic. This one right here is the steel. Now, to give you an idea, these have been sitting out for 2 hours. And that is the difference in the apple test. The sharp versus dull test. So now, what if we cut an apple with a sharp knife and a dull knife? I wanted to try something. What if we cut one apple with a steel sharp knife and one apple with the same steel knife, but we dull it? So, it's along the same condition as the vast majority of people's steel kitchen knives are. Dull. Including mine. We have significantly higher oxidizing on the dull knife cut apple. If you look at these up close, you can see just how much cleaner the sharp knife cuts the apple versus the dull knife. And you can clearly see, at least I can clearly see here in real life, I hope you can see this on camera, we have significantly more oxidizing on the apple that was cut with the dull knife. In my opinion, based on my tests, the reason people think ceramics produce less oxidation is because most people's ceramics are going to be sharper than their dull kitchen knife. People buy ceramics because they are told that they stay sharp longer, and they do. So out of the box testing compared to a dull or steel knife will produce less oxidation. However, when you compare sharp ceramic versus actually sharp steel, the results are even based on what I'm seeing.
So less oxidation has more to do with the dull knife ripping apart food fibers, producing more surface area than it does transferring ions or something like that.
Now, yes, there may be other tests out there cutting specific things where there's a bigger difference between ceramic and steel knives, but you're going to have to leave that down in the comments because, we can only do so much in this video. Now, I know what you're asking, which knife cuts a tomato easier? So I resharpened both knives to as sharp as I could get them and cut a tomato. Or a dozen. And after analyzing slow motion, close-up tomato cutting footage, I came to the dramatic conclusion that they're pretty much exactly the same. And I can't tell a difference whatsoever. Now, what about sisal rope? Because for some reason, the steel knife definitely seemed to cut through the sisal much easier than the ceramic. And after analyzing the slow motion, ultra close-up footage, I can't really tell you why. Now, the only suspected reason that I have that this may have been the case is because the steel knife was indeed slightly sharper than the ceramic knife. Now, I sharpened both of these knives to as sharp as I could possibly get them, and in saying that, I can actually get the steel knife sharper. We can get this knife to a hair-whittling edge. I am unable to get a hair-whittling edge on this knife right here. Now, maybe that's because I don't have the correct diamond progression to get that hair whittling edge, but I can get that same hair whittling edge with this knife with essentially one stone and one strop.
Now the steel knife also did better even after both knives lost their initial high-level sharpness, and I believe this is simply due to a better geometry or a more acute angle we are able to achieve on the steel knife.
Now remember this because this kind of brings us to the conclusion, which is that ceramic knives are very good for certain applications. Maybe you have 1,000 feet of cardboard to cut and can't resharpen your knife at all in the middle of cutting. In that case, I'd pick a ceramic knife any day. Problem is still resharpening these. Because in order to resharpen this, you do need expensive resin bonded diamond stones. And again, if you need to get this to an extremely sharp, very fine edge, you're going to need a couple of them, and these things are kind of expensive. With a steel knife, you can get away with sharpening this thing to an absolute hair whittling edge with one stone and one strop in basically no time whatsoever. That is not the case with ceramic knives. Resin bonded diamond stones are not cheap, and diamond strops are not cheap. So you're going to have to spend some serious money in order to get this thing to the same level of sharpness as this knife. And even when you get there, that apex is so fine and so delicate that literally the first cut you use it on, you're going to end up with microchipping, and it's not going to be that same high-level apex sharpness anymore. You're going to have apex chipping with this. It's just not strong enough to support those ultra-fine geometries. The other problem with ceramic is that it's very easily damaged. I was very worried for some of these tests that I was going to snap this thing before I was done with it. Even some of the heavier cardboard that I cut was kind of iffy. It kind of felt like I probably shouldn't be doing this with this knife. And I shudder to think at how hard it would be to remove larger chips in the edge of this knife than it would a regular old steel knife. For food, this is the thing that kind of gets me because you hear this all the time. These things, the steel knives, they ionize the food, they oxidize the food faster. In my opinion, and in my tests, I just haven't found that to be the case. I think in the vast majority of cases, ceramic knives are generally going to be sharper than the steel knives because they're relatively new, fresh, out of the box, and sharp. These things, however, are tossed in a drawer and they're not taken care of. They're thrown in the dishwasher, and the edges on these are, even in my kitchen, they're dull. So you're going to see some food oxidizing performance degradation more with steel knives than you will with ceramic knives. Now, I'm not saying that these things are completely useless. What I am saying is that, yes, they are sort of fun to play around with, depending on what it is that you're cutting. But I think for the vast majority of people, they may not provide the answer that you're looking for.